Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in good spirits wherever you are in the world. And I would like to continue on with the Q&A videos because, as always, I am so humbled and flattered by your continuing to submit questions to me. And so I'm very grateful to you for continuing to show an interest in me and this channel. So thank you very much, my friends. I cannot begin to tell you enough just how much it means to me. So really, thank you so much for that. And just my way of trying to show my thanks and gratitude, let me now continue on with the Q&A videos. And by my count, we are now at Q&A part 19. I am at the video, the initial video where I asked for questions, and I am picking up where I last left off. And the question next is from Kampa. So hello, and you say, "Hello Daisuke, I really enjoy your videos. It is always great to hear your impressions on film. I have a question regarding reading. Do you have any book on cinema that you have enjoyed lately? I can give you two books I recently enjoyed myself, Room to Dream from David Lynch and Kurosawa Film Studies and Japanese Cinema from Mitsuhiro Yoshimoto. I hope you are well and keep up with the great videos." Oh, thank you very much, Kampa, for your very kind words and your question. So thank you. So do you have any book on cinema that I have enjoyed lately? On cinema, I would say that, what have I enjoyed lately? Let's see. Yeah, okay, well, it's not in English, but there are a couple of books that I am reading or rereading now. And one is this book, which is here. This is a Japanese book. And so the text is in Japanese. And it's not, I don't think it's been published in English, unfortunately. But it's called Japanese Anarchy Movies, 1959 to 2016. And this essentially has films that are of a very, how should I say, they are very charged. They have certain extremes in terms of their style. Sometimes they're action films, sometimes they're horror films, genre films, sometimes they're comedies, sometimes they're other sorts of genre films. Tsukamoto films are mentioned here. Shinya Tsukamoto films are mentioned here, for example. Tampopo, I think, is mentioned here as well. Other films by, let's see, Kitano films are mentioned here as well. Again, these are just examples, but this goes through so many of these films that I think many people outside of Japan are very much into. And plus there are many others that are films that, to my knowledge, haven't been released except within Japan. So they haven't necessarily seen any release from Arrow or Criterion or anything like that. And so, but this is a book that I'm reading right now, or I've read before. I'm just going through it again. It's really great. I wish it could be published in English one day, but anyway. And there's also this one, which is also in Japanese, and this is I think it's called this is the Kinema Junpo top 10 lists, and this is essentially a compilation of all the top 10 lists that Kinema Junpo ever produced and released for each of the years that they were made available, going all the way back to, I think it's 1924, and then going all the way to present times. And so it's a very interesting list, or a compilation of lists. And so Kinema Junpo is is a very popular and key component of modern film criticism, and it's still a publication that is ongoing today. And of course, it's more than just these top 10 lists, but this is just a compilation of those, so I'm just going through that as well. And I also believe that, let me just say also that I'm maybe rereading also. It's not a film book per se, but I do enjoy reading as much as possible. And so I don't talk about books that I'm reading on this channel. As I said in other comments perhaps, or in other videos, I had always have these hopes and dreams and ambitions for this channel. And one of the things that I really want to do, but I've been unable to do so far, is to talk about books, because I really love, I try to read as much as possible. Sometimes I'm not successful, but I try to read as much as possible, because that also is something that means a lot to me. So at the moment, it's not a film. Well, I guess it is kind of a film book, perhaps, but it's not a film studies book or film criticism book. But it's the Kundera work, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. So that's what I'm rereading now at the moment. This is in English, so that's what I'm rereading now at the moment. So. Anyway, my friend, thank you very much for your great comment, and I hope you are well. So thank you very much, Kampa. Next, we have Jose Eduardo Lintz. So hello, it's nice to see you. And you say, hello, Daisuke, I hope you are doing well. My question is as follows. If you could pick two films, one from each century, that stand as the finest and most complete examples of a country's cinematic power, which films would you choose and why? A few countries that I was curious in hearing you talk about are 1. Japan, 2. Russia, 3. France, 4. Italy, 5. USA. 2 films for each country, 1 for each century. Thank you. Wow, that's a very ambitious, excellent question. Wow, that is really great. That is really a very interesting question. And I think I hope I don't want to offend you, and I hope I'm not offending you when I say that I don't think I'd be able to answer this question for most of the countries that you mentioned. And the reason is that it's a great question. It's an absolutely great question, so don't get me wrong. I think it's a fantastic question, but I think I am unable, I am rather intellectually unequipped to be able to answer the questions in a very fulfilling way. And the reason why I think that I'm not able to answer the question very well. Let me just go back to the question. So you say, stand as the finest and most complete examples of a country's cinematic power. A country's cinematic power. Now this is, I think, the key part of your question, if I'm not mistaken. And I interpret that phrase to mean that cinematic power of a country or a particular region or area of the world, in my eyes, refers to the way in which a work of art, whether it be cinema or other work of art, but let's take cinema as the example, because this is a discussion about cinema. The way in which a work of art in cinema expresses this cinematic power, or the power of a particular country. And so I think that inherent in that discussion is a well-grounded understanding in the culture, heritage, and history of a particular country, and those countries that you mention. And so you mentioned, for instance, Russia, France, Italy as examples. And I must admit that my understanding, for instance, of Russian history Russian heritage and culture, my understanding of French history, French heritage and culture, Italian history, Italian heritage and culture, and etc., etc., my understanding is very, very limited. Incredibly limited to the point where I don't think my understanding of those areas of the world is sufficient enough to be able to try, therefore, to then make an answer with respect to what I think would be films that best express the cinematic power of those particular areas of the world. Again, that's just because I don't have a full, rich enough understanding of those areas of the world that would enable me to provide a sufficient level of an answer. I could say that I've seen films, Russian films. I've seen films from France. I have seen films from Italy. I have read up on certain aspects of, say, Italian history. I've read up on certain aspects of French history, etc. But I am not a scholar. I have never lived in these areas. I have never really. I don't know the culture with any directness. I don't have the sense of understanding current events and news and that sort of thing that occurs in these particular regions. And so, therefore, I don't think I'd be able to answer the question. Once again, it's a fantastic question, so I hope you're not offended by my statement saying that I don't think I'm very able to answer the question with respect to most of the regions of the world. I have lived in the United States, and I did live in the United States for a number of years, actually, and I was educated in the United States. And so maybe I could answer the question in the context of the United States. But then again, also, I haven't lived there in a long time. While I follow current events in the United States to the best of my ability, I don't claim to have any direct understanding and appreciation of all aspects of current events and culture, etc. And so I don't think I would be able, for similar reasons, therefore, to answer the question in the context of the United States, unfortunately. Then that comes to Japan. Okay, so I live in Japan now. I am Japanese. I haven't lived in Japan all of my life, and I don't claim to be an all-out scholar, and I don't claim to know absolutely every single thing about every aspect of Japan, its culture, its history, etc. Because even within Japan, I'm sure we all can appreciate that within any part of the world, Japan included, there are different further ways to categorize and subcategorize views of history, geographic regions within the country, etc., that could also further add their own specific dimension to culture and heritage, etc. And so it becomes a very complicated issue. And so even for Japan, I'm not sure if I'd be able to answer the question with any degree of satisfaction. But if I were to take one of these nations, let me take Japan, because that's where I am right now. And so you say one for each century, okay, and you say an expression or examples of the most complete examples of a country's cinematic power. Again, this is something that's very difficult because this can be answered based on one's subjective viewpoints. But again, with the understanding that maybe I might change my mind tomorrow or the day after. As of right now, perhaps I could answer the question by saying, at least as far as the 20th century is concerned, maybe the film Rashomon, Kurosawa's film Rashomon. And this is because I consider that film to be one of the most important works of cinema, both artistically and also in terms of its critical success, both in terms of critical success internationally. I consider that film to be one of the, and I'm not alone, of course, it is generally considered to be a real milestone in Japanese cinema. And this is also very important too because it comes in the post-war era of Japan. And it's a very, therefore it's a symbolic film in terms of the success it was able to achieve internationally, considering the fact that it was made in post-war era Japan. And so I think that is also something that is not without significance. And so this is very important from my point of view. And then, so that's for the 20th century. But again, please understand that my answer could change depending on the day. And also, depending on who you ask, I'm sure other people would come up with different answers. Okay. And the same is true for what I would cite with respect to the current century, the 21st century. Again, we're still relatively in relative time, we're not that far into this current century, where you still have a long way to go. So it's not from it's far from over, and I'm sure I know you realize that the sweeping change of history really can have an impact even within the span of a year, maybe less, and so a lot of things can happen within the scope of 100 years. Of course, right? You don't need me to tell you this, but. Perhaps something like, well, after some thought, perhaps, I mean, it came in the very early years of the 2000s. So it's the Studio Ghibli film Spirited Away. And again, it's a little bit difficult for me because this is, we're living in the moment, and I don't know if that film is necessarily reflective, say, of the current climate right here, right now in 2020. However, as a film that was made or that was released in the 21st century, I could say that it is one that I think might also, in a similar way that Rashomon had a certain international success. This is also a film that had an impact not just in Japan but also internationally. It is also a film that is an animation film, but that also includes aspects of folklore and Japanese myth, and that is expressed in this very successful, critically and commercially successful form of a film. And so I think that is also very representative of a lot of aspects of current Japanese cinema, the industry. And so perhaps Spirited Away. But again, it's a very difficult question, but it's a great one. It's a really great question. And I really want to thank you very much for this, Jose. I really appreciate it. And again, I hope my answers were satisfactory, but if not, I really apologize. But wonderful question. And again, I apologize also for not being able to answer it to the fullness that you were expecting. So please accept my apologies, but once again, please know that it's a fantastic question. So thank you very much, Jose, and I hope you are well. Next is a question from Vanessa Buttino. So Vanessa, hello. It's nice to see you, and I hope you're doing well, my friend. And you say, if you were given the opportunity to watch one film for the very first time again, which film would it be? Which film would you like to experience again for the first time? And you emphasize the word one. So you say, if you were given the opportunity to watch one film for the very first time again, which film would it be? Yes, this is a very great question, and another very difficult one for me to answer because you emphasize the word one, my friend. And I think you emphasize that because you know that the possibilities are pretty much infinite in answering this question. So in other words, I could go on and on and on about this. But you say one film. Very difficult question. Wow, this is a great question. I love this. I love this very much. But if there's one film that I could choose to watch again for the first time, I can watch with fresh eyes, not knowing what happens in the film, and to experience the excitement and the surprise and energy of watching it for the first time again, what would it be? I suppose, and again, with the understanding that if you asked me this question and I answered it say, tomorrow or the next day, my answer would probably be a completely different film. But with that understanding, then let me say that I was born in 1979. And so by my count, that makes me, 41 years old, right? I'm 41 years old. And so, but I was born in 1979, and so I was a child of the 80s. And as part of that, I grew up and I watched films from a relatively early age. And but part of that, and looking back on my memories and what I recall from these films from the early to mid 1980s, is that I don't remember a time where I didn't see certain films that came from this period, the early to mid 1980s, and there are a bunch. There are a lot of these films, and I think this is true for all of us, depending on when we were born and the period in which we grew up. There are those films where I think we always remember having seen. We never remember seeing it for the first time, but we always remember seeing it because that's we saw it when we were young, and our memories are such that it becomes something where we remember it now and we think, oh, we've always seen that film, or I can't remember a time when I didn't see that film. And I've mentioned a number of films on this channel already, not all, but a number of those films that I have that experience with. And they oftentimes come from this period, the early to mid 1980s. And so with that in mind, I would say that this film that I'm about to say is one of those films. And it's a film that I, as I say, cannot remember. I don't know a time where I can't remember a time where I didn't see this film. And it's a film that I haven't discussed on this channel. It's a film that's very, very popular, incredibly popular, and it's very, very famous. I think everyone knows this film, and it's the film called The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back. And it was released in 1980, and I was born in 1979. And so this was a film that I always remember having seen. In other words, I was born in 1979, and so this film came out a year later, and then I grew up watching Star Wars films, and so this was a film that I always felt like I knew. I don't remember the first time I saw it, and so its surprises and its twists and turns were things that were always known to me. They were always known to me. And and it's a brilliant film. It's an absolutely brilliant film. I'm, of course, one of many in the chorus that celebrates this film, and I think rightly so, of course. And so The Empire Strikes Back is it's just a wonderful entertainment, and it's just a brilliant time, and it never grows old in my eyes. But it's a film, as I say, one that I don't remember seeing for the first time because I was too young, or maybe my memory is such that I can't remember it anymore. But that would be the film that I could use to answer your question. So if I were given the opportunity to watch one film for the very first time again, I think it would be The Empire Strikes Back. Again, for the reasons about wanting to experience it, or at least wanting to know what the experience was like watching it for the first time, because I don't know, and I wish I did, because I think as much as I love the film now, I think I would really be so much more in love with the film with that experience of watching it for the first time and having that palpable memory safely secured in my mind and in my heart. And so I think that's one. And I could also say that also for the other Star Wars films during this time, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And so Return of the Jedi came a little bit later, and so I was still quite young, and I was too young to remember now exactly my feelings watching that film for the first time. But the same is true of for Empire Strikes Back, and so that's how I would answer the question. So yes, so The Empire Strikes Back would be the film I would use to answer your question, but with the understanding that if I were to answer this question tomorrow, then my answer would surely be something different. But anyway, my friend, thank you so much for your great question. A really great question, and yeah, that's wonderful. So thank you, my friend, and I hope you are well. Thank you. And with that, my friends, I want to say thank you very much for your time, and I'm sorry I didn't answer all the Q&A questions, but I will continue this in further videos. So thank you very much, and until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you once again for your time, my friends, and cheers.